Hello again. Welcome to the second roundtable discussion of the day. I would like to introduce Richard Davidson, Middle East Director for Waste at Ricardo Energy and Environment, who will moderate this roundtable discussion. Based in Dubai, Richard is a chartered waste manager and has over 15 years experience in the waste management industry. He started his career in the sector as an environmental manager at a C&D processing facility in the UK and continued to work in the sector with various clients, supporting the development of C&D facilities. He was also involved in the formulation of the Abu Dhabi Quality Conformity Scheme for recycled aggregates. Over to Richard.
Thank you, Swalia. Thanks for the introduction and welcome to the audience. Good morning, evening, wherever everybody's joining us from. Really appreciate you coming, and welcome to the panelists as well. As Swalia said, my name's Richard Davidson. I'm going to moderate this session today on closing a loop, moving towards a circular economy in the construction and demolition sector. So today I'm joined by an extremely experienced panel who come from across the globe. We have Ahmed Taher with us from Dhafra Recycling Industries LLC. We also have Jason Haus, CEO of Demcon companies from Minneapolis in the States. And last but not least, we also have Richard Ludt from the Director of Environmental Affairs at Interior Removal Specialists Inc. Now, before we get started, I just wanted to give our panelists a chance to introduce themselves. I'll start in that order. Ahmed, could you provide a bit of an introduction to yourself and some of your background in 2 minutes or so? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. Pleasure to meet you all, Richard and Jason. I'm a general manager of Dhafra Recycling Industries. I've been working with Dhafra for now over 10 years. We've established a recycling facility in Abu Dhabi, UAE, in partnership with Tadweer, the Center of Waste Management, achieving a lot of milestones and challenges to reach where we are now, selling what we're producing, and also overcoming the challenges of the incoming material coming to the facility. Basically, we produce the recycled crushed aggregates used in sub-bays and road bays, also various applications like the sub-ballast in the Etihad Rail project. The material has achieved a lot of durability and performance compared to virgin quarry aggregates, and it has also supplied to a lot of mega projects, along with the support with the Tadweer as a government entity, Abu Dhabi Waste Management Center. This has been supporting us, and thank you.
Thanks, Ahmed. Thanks for that. I'll move over to Jason now. Jason, could you do a quick introduction, please?
Sure. Yep. I'm happy to be here. I'm Jason Haus from Demcon Companies. We're located in the state of Minnesota in the U.S. and just south of the Minneapolis and St. Paul area. I'm involved in a company that's a third generation family owned and operated company here. We've been managing and recycling construction and demolition waste for almost 3 decades. And we deal with incoming waste coming from residential generators, commercial generators, interior demolition contractors, full building demolition. We have C&D recycling facilities, as well as scrap metal processing yards, and then an end land disposal facility as well.
Great. Thanks for that, Jason. And over to you, Richard. And I guess slightly confusing that there's 2 Richards on the call today, but I guess our accents are quite different. And when we spoke the other night, you did tell me I sounded like I was from Boston, which I'll take as a compliment. But yeah, we'll leave it at that. But over to you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to talk to. Oh, sorry about that. My name is Richard Ludt. I am from Southern California. I am I work for Interior Removal Specialist, which is an interior demolition contractor. We found out, as everybody knows, with C&D being the weight-based metric, that the interior demolition debris at a lot of facilities is kind of ignored and landfilled. So about 16 years ago, we started our own recycling facility that specializes just in commercial interior debris. We've proven that you can get better than 80% diversion from interior debris. where our main components are things like drywall and carpet and ceiling tiles. Drywall is 30% of our inbound weight. So we started that, and that gives us a slightly different view of the C&D industry than most facilities, because we do have such a small niche. It's just such a small portion of that waste stream that we process.
Very good. Thank you for that, Richard. And just to kick off, I thought probably just kind of taking a slight step back and just providing a bit of background context on the subject matter. So the construction sector is the world's largest user of raw materials from natural resources. I've spent a bit of time on Google just before today just to get some facts for us, but I've read a well-researched article from Frontiers in Sustainable Cities, and kind of quite surprising, but the industry construction sector uses about 50% of all steel produced globally annually, and accounts for about 36% of final energy use as well, and also contributes to about 39% of all energy-related carbon emissions across the world as well. And in terms of I guess the scale of the C&D waste as well, it's the largest source of waste generation globally as well. In the US, where Richard and Jason are from, 600 million tons a year of C&D waste is produced. That's about twice as much as municipal waste, I believe, in the US, and in the EU, they generate about 370 to 400 million tons a year as well. So massive scale. But I think by and large, kind of across, and at least in the mature markets, we're seeing that 60 to 70% recycling rate can be achieved in the market, and up to 100% in some places. So in the earlier roundtable discussion, we heard from Ewan, who was moderating, that he's working with some clients in the UK that are achieving 100%, and also Mohammed from BIA also mentioned that they were achieving 100% as well, which all very good. So I think just to kind of close off the context, then we also have to recognize that construction and demolition waste is really kind of comes from two streams. So the kind of minority source would be from new build waste, so coming from new materials during construction. Usually construction activities generate certain amounts of unavoidable waste, and that's probably about 1 to 10% of all purchased materials in new builds, and that makes up, I'd say, about 10% of all C&D waste. But the main source obviously is from demolition activities, and buildings produce waste over their whole lifetime, not just when they're demolished at the end. So demolition waste also obviously includes works that Richard, Jason, you're involved in around renovations and partial replacements of assets, things like that as well. So I think our focus for today is kind of taking the benefit of the experience that all our panelists bring to us today is really going to be around discussing the demolition industry and demolition waste. And just before really diving into the kind of the deep dive into the details, going to start more broadly and just kind of put a question out there, just to test really that in terms of within the circular economy, there is a recognition that although there is, as we've kind of just seen earlier in the earlier sessions, as a high level of recycling in the sector, and that generally that's considered to be fairly low grade recycling. So, and that's probably mainly due to the fact that you're processing demolition waste from historic buildings and kind of dealing with contamination issues as well. But now within the kind of context of the circular economy, there's much more focused on closed loop recycling. So kind of the focus being on producing new products indefinitely without losing the value of that material during the recycling process. And just kind of a first question to you, Ahmed, really is, do you think that's a fair assessment of the status of the kind of C&D recycling industry now, that it is more focused on those lower grade products?
Richard, yes, I do believe so. Now, UAE have just in January 2021 have issued a UAE circular economy And we're trying now to implement it and apply it across the UAE and now probably to be helpful in the Gulf region as well, since we are pioneers in this industry, in this part of the region. Now, it's going to help us now eliminate. Now, we had a discussion earlier with the gents here. Now, each and every region have illegal facilities, or they're facing with illegal dumpings. And now this, to emphasize that circular economy helps out to save the environment, and eco-friendly projects and careers will come up, which also help the idea of strict measures and mandating the requirements of the legal C&D recognized facilities to divert the waste from the landfills, and also recycle and use all this waste, and eventually sustain to the UAE vision in specific of 2026 to have a 75% diversion from landfills.
Okay, so that's 75% for construction and demolition waste, is it, or overall? Overall in general, so 75% by 2026. Very good, very good. And I guess kind of over to you, Jason. What, in that context, what do you think needs to happen to kind of embed circular principles in the industry to kind of drive towards kind of recovering products more than kind of focused on those lower value materials?
Yeah, I think to answer that question, Richard, it really comes down to the end market. You can't really have a circular economy with these products and a circular recycling opportunity without having somewhere to move these materials. So, you know, we've said for many years, we can take in any mixed material, separate them all out into different piles and different truckloads of material. But if you have nowhere to haul them to, all you've done is just put a lot of time and effort into separating a bunch of things without having a home for them. So, you know, what we spend the majority of our time on is end market development, trying to make sure we have somewhere where these materials can go. Some are easier than others. You know, steel is a relatively easy market. That's a commodity. We all understand that. The cardboard and packaging, and again, another commodity. We all understand that. Once you move beyond those commodity-based products where there's typically markets available, that's where it starts to get challenging. You know, it's how do you handle gypsum drywall, and what is the end market for that material? What is the end market for carpet that we see come into our facilities? Asphalt shingles has a developing market within the US. So it's really trying to find outlets for that material that helps and really is mandated by that circular requirement, because if you don't have to send it to on the back end, the circular part of it breaks down.
Understood. And question to you, Richard, then is just, are you seeing evidence of kind of any trends occurring where policymakers are kind of driving towards that in California and other regions where you work?
You definitely asked the right person that question. California has some rather intense recycling laws. Okay, in the state of California, it's mandated that you must show at least 65% diversion from all construction demolition projects. Wow. So that's in our state building code. But that starts getting into some problems, because like Jason said, you can mandate a number, but oftentimes all that does is encourage cheating, because you have to reach that number, you know. And the other side of that coin is, you know, regionally you have different markets for different materials. Jason struggles with drywall. I have, because California has a very high clay content in the soil, I can ship 1,200 tons of drywall a month to farmers who will use that as a soil amendment, because it's gypsum and paper. I mean, that's really all it is. But one of the things I always like to talk about when we talk about C&D, when we talk about, you know, diversion rates and everything else, you were talking about low value materials, but I find it to be exactly the opposite. All that anybody's recycling is the high value materials, the things you can get paid for on both sides of the scale. You know, you get paid when it comes in and you have a market for it. Now, because C&D is a weight-based metric, if you look at it, and Jason has a much better idea of the real numbers than I do, because I deal with commercial interior, but you're going to get 25 to 35% of your inbound material from inerts, concrete and asphalt. You're going to get 35 to 45% of your inbound weight from dimensional lumber, 2x4s and 4x4s, that stuff. And then you've got metal. So with those three commodities, you can hit your recycling mandate.
Yeah.
But the issue is the materials that are left over tend to be the light, fluffy, toxic materials. So what we're doing is we're recycling the more benign stuff, and the more toxic, the more problematic stuff in the landfill is what is actually being disposed of. And so that's one of the reasons the weight-based metric, while mandatory, shouldn't be the only metric we use when we're looking at diversion.
Okay, and what other kind of metrics would you kind of propose that should be
Toxicity.
kind of in a basket?
Toxicity. What causes most damage in the landfill? Let's target those materials first. And sadly, that's only going to be done by mandate because they're more expensive materials to handle. And there isn't a real market for them. But if we want to talk sustainability and we want to talk green, let's not just talk about percentages, but let's talk about damage done and toxicity. And that's a conversation nobody's having.
Yeah, and I guess you mentioned there that the target in California is 65%, and that's per construction project as well. And that, I guess what I'm hearing is that on its own is not really achieving what it needs to do in terms of kind of improving and protecting the environment and enhancing sustainability and all those good things. Okay, no, really interesting. And I guess, are you seeing, I guess, how would you, with that 65% as a driver, and kind of we can like stick with you, Richard, is that kind of help drive investment into the industry, into kind of construction, demolition, waste recovery, recycling activities? Is there great momentum in the right direction? Yeah,
it definitely does, because since there's a mandate, people have to recycle. Now in California, taking your material to a landfill is less expensive than taking it to a material recovery facility. So without that mandate, it would all go straight to the landfill. But because the state has said that you have to show that diversion or you don't get a sign off on your project, they have no choice but to deliver to a facility, which is obviously a wonderful incentive to build a facility and charge those high numbers to bring that material in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Jason, sticking with the States, is where you are in Minnesota, do you have targets there that are driving kind of interest from construction projects to recycle?
Yeah, I would say we're a little bit different than Richard in California. We have very little government mandate, but we live in a pretty progressive state. All of the recycling that's done here in Minnesota is done because the customer wants the material to be recovered. It's not necessarily government mandated, but if you don't recycle the project, you're not going to get hired as the provider of the service. So it's a little bit more, I would say, economic and open market driven than it is government focused, but there's limitations to that too, because a lot of times you are sticking to the three main easiest, lowest hanging fruit, if you will, materials. So you never get down into the smaller percentage, harder to recycle items. Some companies choose to, we continue to push the levels on what types of materials we recycle. But I would say our market is that's what's unique about the US is we have all different markets in nearly every 50 states. And then even within your own state, markets can be very different. I'm within the metro area of the state of Minnesota, and then we have what we call outstate, less populated. And even the processes and your ability to recycle changes dramatically within a 100-mile radius of where we are. So it's really, to me, in our market, it's driven more by the customer than it is by mandate.
Yeah. And I guess just same question to you, Ahmed. We'll stick with that one. Just we heard earlier on Roundtable 1 that in Abu Dhabi, they also have a mandate of using 40% recycled material in new construction projects. And I believe that came in after your facility, the Dhafra recycling in Abu Dhabi. Did you notice that having a big impact on your business?
Actually, it's our official concession agreement with Tadweer was basically from the day of this decree mandate was out. So this was basically one of the final conditions, yeah, if you remember, to operate our facility was that the key mandate feature, which is the decree number 57, stating that a minimum 40% of each and every infrastructure project or construction project would use minimum 40% of recycled crushed aggregates. Now we're always targeting to reach 100%, and we've managed also successfully to supply 100% of most projects with the recycled crushed aggregates, because the proven of the strategic location and proven the cost-effective and economic and environmental friendly products, and the durability and performance of the material itself. Similarly, also what Jason we're trying to do is basically the absence of policies and regulations and helping the enforcement from the government to mandate the use of recycled, and also teaching in schools or in the communities the waste management processes and the proper segregation would help also the recycling facilities to divert exactly where and what to use to the proper legal channels and the legal facilities, sorting like Jason's facilities, where the proper sorting, and then utilize whatever the products that is produced where it can. Now in Norway and in Eastern Europe, reach to the zero waste or 100% recycling for all the products, which is a milestone that what we're targeting here. So 100% diversion from landfills.
Excellent, excellent. And I'm going to kind of move on a bit and kind of narrow in. So green building schemes, they're mentioned in the area, are touched on briefly in the earlier session. So we have the likes of the LEED scheme that everyone's aware of, BREEAM, and then in the Middle East, where we're about Ahmed, the likes of Estidama, GSAS, and those kind of things. How important a role do you think they play in advancing sustainability of the built environment? I'll stick with you, Ahmed, on that one to start off with.
Sorry, come again?
Do you think that the green building schemes do they have what's been the main, I guess, what's been the main driver of those schemes in that you're aware of?
Now, in UAE, we have the Estidama ratings, or similar to the LEED. LEED is more international. Following the LEED and Estidama ratings, that needs to be mandated. Unfortunately, it's an optional for projects. If we mandate it and make it mandatory for all projects, ultimately each and every project, even after handover, the waste will properly be utilized through proper channels, the proper facilities. Since it's only optional, basically it's still, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's great. And Jason, like, what's your perception of kind of with developers, property managers? Is there a real interest in using or attaching their projects to a LEED green building scheme or equivalent in your region?
Yeah, so I think if you rewind maybe 10 to 12 years, I think what LEED did is it jump-started our industry. I think it got people thinking about it. It spurred some investment because large projects wanted this LEED requirement. We're seeing less and less LEED required processing, but again, the building owners still want the material processed. So although it doesn't have the LEED symbol attached to it or the LEED program attached to it, the work is still getting done. It's just not necessarily associated with LEED due to some of the costs and the other parameters that people aren't choosing to sign on to that specific program. But we've seen offshoots of that from a local permitting and a local certification perspective. So, I give LEED a lot of credit for kind of jumpstarting our industry without having government mandates. I'm seeing less and less requirements for LEED specifically, but we're still getting the recycling done. So I think that's positive.
Absolutely. And I wanted to come back to you, Richard, and kind of related question just in terms of tying in with LEED and what you kind of where we were talking about kind of a lot of this being driven by developers and project managers wanting to recycle. And I'm just curious as to how much scrutiny do clients put on kind of getting access to kind of data and kind of being able to verify and kind of accredit the data you provide them to kind of be able to go back to whether it's a lead scheme or a local regulatory or permitting requirements.
Once again, you know, California, you asked the right guy. To circle back real quick to what Jason was saying, just real quick before I hit your question, in California, early on with LEED, a lot of cities, California or in Los Angeles and Pasadena and San Francisco actually mandated LEED for some of their building codes. So in Los Angeles, any project of 50,000 square feet or more had to go LEED Silver, which I didn't necessarily agree with, because LEED is a program of innovation, and mandating innovation is never a good idea, because they codify this in 2008, but by 2015, LEED Silver is a completely different animal, but it's still been codified. So that's kind of a problem. As far as the tenants and the clients looking for it, again, most of our reputation, well, no, not most, a lot of our reputation has to do with how green we are as a company and how much we recycle. So that has a lot to do with some of our clients. Now, there's a lot who don't care. There's still a lot of clients out there who, if it costs them $100 more, they don't want to do it. But there are clients, we have done big projects for companies like Google and Red Bull and Activision. And these companies are all very, very aware of the environmental aspect of what they're doing. And the companies are actually pushing the contractors above and beyond what is mandated by the city to get that diversion, because they want to be able to tell their customers that they've done everything that they can. So we've actually had some of the environmental people from some of these large companies touring our recycling yard before the project kicks off, just to verify that they're going to get what they're being told they're getting.
Yeah. That's interesting. And I guess kind of mentioning those kind of clients like the Googles of this world, like have you noticed any kind of readjustments now in terms of focus? So we all know LEED, but is there a move now towards more kind of interest in kind of achieving corporate sustainability? Our net zero targets are kind of more talk around circular economy rather than just purely around how do we divert waste from landfill to hit this metric for LEED or whatever other standard our local requirements.
Like I said, with the bigger, more socially aware companies, very much so. Things like law firms who tend to take up large chunks of space in commercial real estate. Some of them yes, some of them no. And again, some companies just don't care. And even when it comes to the LEED or the city or state mandates, they don't even really care if they're getting the diversion they say, as long as they can provide the paperwork and get their sign off. You know, that's the big deal. But it's heartening that there are those big companies that are pushing, and when it is companies like Google and Activision and Red Bull that have gigantic customer bases that are all young and all socially aware, that says a lot for the future, because if they're catering to that desire, then as those people come up and supplant the people who are retiring, I think that's going to engender an even higher push for diversion down the line.
Excellent. That's great. And I can see we have a couple of questions coming in already. I think the first one kind of segues in with where I wanted to move to next. So I think I'll come back to it and just kind of start with kind of moving into materials and building materials. And we kind of touched on a little bit of this earlier, but kind of we all know the success of concrete crushing, and kind of there's business to be done there. But just in terms of other building materials, what other materials have made kind of good progress in kind of being kind of financially viable to recycle without kind of a lot of government intervention? I'll start with one of you guys from the US first, maybe Jason, if you want to take that question.
Sure. I can list one product that we've had some success in, and it's asphalt roofing shingles. So in the US, that's a main building product, goes on the majority of homes that are built, has a limited lifespan. So they're constantly being replaced, either that they've worn out or a storm came in and damaged them. We have the ability now to take those materials in post-consumer use and clean them up, grind them, screen them, and they get mixed into new hot mix asphalt. So they go back into new roads being built. A shingle that sits on top of your roof has about 20% asphalt content in it.
Yeah.
So for years and years, we were burying the value of that asphalt in the landfills, and now we have the ability to reutilize and extract that asphalt from that product and not have to use virgin asphalt in those mixes. So we've had some success around the country in the US recycling asphalt shingles. We also have the ability to mix in ground shingles with gravel to put on more rural gravel roads to supplant the dust. There's a 90% reduction in dust that's generated from these roads when you're blending this material in together. So I would say that's a success story around the country for one product specifically.
Yeah, and same question let's move to the UAE, Ahmed. What other materials are you looking at? Not just concrete crushing. Is there any other areas you're interested in?
Similarly, here we also have the asphalt. Now, recently also we've just duplicated the process of approving and mandating the recycled crushed concrete aggregates. We have now the RAP, the recycled asphalt products, which is again similar, 0 to 40 mm with a very high CBR, and performance is very high. And now we're going to be mandated, and the specification is going to be hopefully out running before end of the year. But from a different point of view, we also were the pioneers and the first facility in the world to operate with solar panels. So we've reduced our diesel consumption because we're outside the electric grid. We've used solar panels to run up the facility. It was a marvelous achievement, and it was stunning in terms of sustainable energy, even in a recycling facility. So this is something that people can look into and start diverting their own energy through solar energy.
And how much of your energy needs are you meeting through solar versus, I guess, diesel generators?
We've had it in a two phase. In our initial phase, we've reduced up to 35% of our diesel consumption. Back earlier this year, we've launched our second expansion, and currently we're up to 80% savings on our diesel consumption, and the carbon footprint is brilliant.
Yeah, no, absolutely, really interesting to hear about that. I think it'd be interesting, I think, to go to you, Richard, as well on the same question, because I know your kind of focuses on kind of demolition and on interiors as well. So is what materials are kind of ones that you focus on? Because obviously concrete isn't your bread and butter, I'm presuming.
Yeah, when we take concrete out, people fall down to the next floor, and nobody likes that, so they try and avoid that. I kind of like to flip this question around and look at it the other way. What are the materials we can't get rid of? Because I can talk about the interesting ones. Ceiling tile. Armstrong has a phenomenal ceiling tile recycling program. They'll take it back for free. They'll make brand new ceiling tile out of it. Recycling a ton of acoustic ceiling tile saves 1,800 gallons of water, which is a ridiculous amount of water. That's almost a gallon a pound.
Yeah.
It's an underutilized program because the ceiling tiles have to be captured on the job site, stacked, palletized, kept clean. By the time it gets to a recovery facility, they're too commingled, dirty, and damaged to recycle. So that's a cool one. But again, what I'd like to look at the stuff that we can't. The biggest problem I deal with is manufactured lumber, particle board, plywood, MDF. That is such a ubiquitous material. It's in every project. And outside of waste to energy and trying to recover the embodied energy inside that material, there is zero outlet for it. You know, you can't crush it up and grind it and put it into a new product, because the chemicals that are in there, you know, you've got your formaldehyde and your pesticide and all the other stuff. So you crush that up, you put it into a new material, you're doubling the chemical load when you add that material. Nobody wants to do that. You can't mulch it, you can't land apply it because of the chemicals. So again, we have this material that is literally in every project with almost no outlet for it whatsoever.
Wow,
I think that's one of the things we as an industry really have to look at, is those materials, because the manufacturers, and God love them, everybody's in this business to make money, but they have not, they have made great strides in lowering the amount of formaldehyde and kind of trying to drop the chemical footprint of those materials, but those chemicals are still there, just in lesser quantities.
Yeah.
So,
I guess that was a nice segue into my next question to you, is just what can the government do to help with the likes of that wood board and kind of similar materials? What support is needed to kind of create that market?
I don't know. I really don't. One of the things Jason said earlier is absolutely true. You cannot force a market. If it doesn't exist, it doesn't exist. And there are just certain materials that are very difficult to recycle. Now, Jason also mentioned earlier, carpet is a problem for him. Now, in California, we have something called CARE, which is Carpet America Recovery Effort. And that's kind of like a buyback for carpet. So when you purchase carpet in California, you pay a deposit of 25 cents a yard. And at the back end, that recycler gets that. So there is small incentive, but some incentive to recycle carpet here. So that's cool. You could do something similar to that with like a manufactured lumber, but the problem is with carpet, you can at least pull out the nylon. You have a recoverable material. Whereas with something like a manufactured lumber, nobody really has that process yet. Now, there's a lady at CDR we've been talking about that has a program, a system called Myocycle, where she's using mushrooms to deal with asphalt shingle and stuff to take the toxicity out. Fungus will actually eat them. There is some promising information that the Myocycle process might actually be able to take out some of the toxicity of that manufactured lumber. I'd like to see more money and more research put into that.
So is that
but
something
absent
the government can help with? Yeah.
What's that?
Is that something the government should be helping with and funding that kind of
I
research
think so.
and development?
Yeah.
Excellent.
But they tend to leave that to the free market.
Yeah.
And then yell at us when we can't do it, when we don't have the $200 million it takes to put into the R&D to make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm going to not fall into the trap of not asking any of the questions from the audience. So I'm just going to kind of move over to those and see what we have quickly, and then kind of judge how much time we have left. But we have one from Gabriel O'Keefe, a good Irish name. Staggering statistics, but the good news is that the capability and innovation exists to recover commodities that can be recovered, reused and recycled. Do the panel believe the end market has matured apace with the recovery and recycling capability? And I'll go to you first with that one, Jason.
I don't think the end markets have kept pace, because I think we can separate more, we can do more, the equipment's much better, it's more technical, it's more robotic. I think we have the ability to separate way more materials than we have end markets for that we sit today. And I think the end markets need to catch up. We can process and separate anything. It's just the end markets aren't there for everything that we can separate. So I don't think they've kept pace.
And is that where the government needs to step in, whether kind of, I guess in the US, the federal or state level government, to kind of put in those interventions, whatever?
Yeah, to me, I think it's a little twofold. I think the government would help, but I think if it's all government supported, eventually that plan may run out. The money that they may put into something may run out. If an administration changes, we can't build our businesses based on a current administration being supportive and then the next administration not being supportive and then that money goes away. It's too difficult to spend the capital when you don't know a long-term understanding of whether that money is going to be there. I think earlier I said twofold. I think it's government interaction and it's manufacturer interaction. Because there's a lot of things that are manufactured that make it incredibly challenging to recycle, kind of like what Richard was talking about. That we need to have everybody at the table talking about manufacturing a product with its end life in mind when they do it. And I think that's one of the pieces that we're missing.
Absolutely. It's I guess does the government have a role then in kind of encouraging manufacturers to kind of speak to you guys, the recyclers, and kind of make sure that, you know, they're not using those materials that can't be recycled, making things simpler.
But potentially moving the requirements upstream. You know, one of the issues we have is we're mandated with recycling requirements, but we can only recycle the materials that are delivered to us. So if we were all at the table and if they had the end life in mind when they developed a product, I think that would make a big difference. Absolutely.
I've just been told we have less than 2 minutes, or 10 minutes left. So I see there's a question that's come in from Matish, which looks like it might be aimed at the GCC market, Ahmed. So I'll go to you with this one. So Matish has asked, how important is legislation in driving diversion versus creating awareness in markets, especially within the GCC? Given the lack of awareness about construction waste diversion, is the only way legislation enforcement to drive behavioral change? So I guess that is
it is very important, Richard. And this is basically what we're trying to say here. The legislation it was a key feature of our success. It's a mandate. There is legislation with the municipalities and all our government bodies in partnership with our government partners like Tadweer, helping us and supporting through talking with them and highlighting that the use of the recycled crushed aggregates is very important for the government, for the environment, for the community. So it's definitely something that's very important. However, also what we are basically looking for, as earlier in the previous session with Engineer Abdul Mohsen mentioned, it's the motivation and incentives that's required by the government to support something like detaxation, something like subsidizing the recycled products. So basically, if there's a waiving of the taxes on buying recycled products, it will help out from the legal facilities. Of course, the recognized facilities will help basically people to recycle more.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I guess
moving on. Can I jump on that real quick, just for one quick second?
Please do, Richard.
Being from California, which is one of the most heavily legislated states, you know, or areas when it comes to this, I'm not as big a fan of the government taking, you know, as Ahmed said, the detaxation stuff, that's all great, but you're getting in the way of the free market economy. And until there is a profit to be made from a material, it's not going to be recycled. And if you mandate it, you're going to get greenwashing and cheating more than recycling, because all people want to do is show that they complied with that legislation. So until you can make it into a profit center, and that's the problem with the government stepping in. It's amazing, and it works out well for some things, because eventually the market becomes available and there is a profit center, and that will continue to be recycled even if the mandate goes away.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't become a profit center, then once the mandate goes away, so does that diversion.
Yeah, no, good points. And I think we're almost coming close to the end of our time, but I kind of, when I was kind of thinking about this session today, I kind of one thing I wanted to kind of ask you guys is, as you're very much at the coal face of the industry and have your finger on the pulse and know where things are going, is that where do you really see the industry in kind of 10 years, 15 years from now? I think the one area I kept coming back to is that, you know, circular economy, we want to move toward embed it in the construction industry, but a lot of our building stock is kind of built on old practices, so you don't have that kind of built for deconstruction, or the modular design hasn't been included yet. So there's going to be a bit of a latent drag between, in some respects, some of the aspects that can happen occurring. And just really interested, and I'm sure the audience are as well, as to where you guys think things are going to move in kind of in whatever time frame you want to choose. Keep with you, Richard, on that one.
Honestly, I don't know. The problem with California, and I love this state, born and raised here, but we have our issues. Legislation is big here, and I don't know where it's going to go. Industry-wide, I think we have no place to go but up. We're dealing with finite resources. We're dealing with waning landfill space. We're dealing with a lot of issues that are going to make us continue on the path that we're on. But the reasons why and the exact direction it goes, that's really hard to figure out what that's going to be. So, I mean, from a corporate point of view, that's our hope, and that's our push, is to make it keep going in the sustainable direction. But if we get a more, who knows? Yeah.
No, absolutely. And obviously, as you've a good point you've made is it has to make economic sense as well. And over to you, Richard, sticking with Jason, sorry, sticking with the States before we move back to the Middle East. Same question to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll continue to get better. We'll get better at what we do. I think the equipment will get better. There'll be more automation. It'll give us the ability to hopefully lower the price of processing due to newer, better, more automated equipment. I think we'll start to push those end markets in the next 10 years. I think we'll make strides that we've made in the last 10 years. This industry is relatively new. Comparative to solid waste generation, I think we'll be better at the numbers. I think one of the things that our industry doesn't get credit for is all of the other recycling that we're doing. So I think we'll have better number information that'll come out, but I think it's continual efforts in working on end markets, and that the association that Richard and I are both involved with, that's where we spend the largest amount of our time is working on that. And some strides might be small, they might be limited by geographic region, but those things will add up over time. And I'm bullish on what we're able to do in the future.
Excellent. No, thanks for that. And I guess to you, Ahmed, where do you see the industry? I think you have a bit of some cheat notes, because you mentioned now that the UAE have issued the circular economy policy, so that hopefully gives you a bit of a roadmap to where you're going to be focusing in the next few years.
Well, in opposite to the Jensen in USA, we are here basically like an infant market compared. And when we started off in 2010, we were like 30, 40 years old from the Western world in the recycling business. So as pioneers, we're still in the preliminary stages. Now, even like in order to reach our next step, or the raw market for us is for the segregation, like what Jason is having and Richard, of new material and segregating properly, even the incoming waste. Yani for us, we have still up till now an acceptance criteria list. We don't receive everything, despite that it's categorized as C and D waste, in order not to have issues with our final product that what producing. Another issue also that we are also in a different kind of agreement. We're in a PPP, public-private partnership with Tadweer. And based on that, the support of the government here is helping us, and even enforcing the UAE circular economy will help us even to, despite the illegal facilities, but will help us basically enhance the profitability of us as a private sector operating on behalf of the government, since we have a BOT contract with them, and a concession agreement. And basically based on that, we are somehow profitable, or we can make more profit since we have the support of the government. So it's an idea that if more PPPs happen, so it's a nice JV that will help both win-win situation for everybody.
Excellent. No, thank you for that. Appreciate it. And I think we have a little bit more time left, and I think just to put out, oh, maybe we don't. So yeah, is that the?
Go ahead, Richard, please.
Oh, is that the time up?
No, please.
Okay, do we have a bit of time for another round of questions?
Round? I don't think so. For your final
Okay.
comments, yes.
Final comments. Okay, well, I think I'll pick an easy one and just kind of ask each person on the panel, what was the one topic that we didn't talk about today that we really should be talking about at the moment? And to you first, Ahmed.
I believe it's the importance of the awareness. How more can we emphasize on the awareness and for the public? And it was for me changing the mindset of the contractors from virgin aggregates to recycled was a very challenging at my early stages 10 years ago. So it took around 2 years for me to convince people to utilize the recycled compared to the virgin aggregates. So I believe that we need more awareness or more sessions to explain and people to understand how, as Richard was saying, from the new people and young people who are enthusiastic about the recycling, how we can help them more, and also utilize the students in universities to help us with the R&Ds and save the money of the R&Ds, but how to help the universities and students to make more researches on how to utilize the recycled products and segregation of this material.
Thanks for that. And Jason, same question to you, please.
Yeah, the one thing that I would say is that we didn't talk about a lot is the standardization of reporting and making sure that we're all reporting on the same type of information, the same products, making sure that one facility is reporting the same as another facility, because the numbers are all over. People report differently. They record their materials, some by the ton, some by the yard, and that just makes summarization of this data very, very difficult. And I think that's one thing that we didn't talk about much, but we are trying to work on it locally, where we have a standardization of how we report tonnages and materials.
Yeah, no, and I have a feeling Richard will agree with you on that one from previous.
I do on that. For me, the one thing that we haven't talked about that we really need to is enforcement. It's really easy to pass an ordinance. It's really easy to pass a law. It's really easy to say you have to do something. Enforcing it and holding people to that is the difficult part. Ahmed, Jason, and I all face the problem of having illegal processors right down the street from us that are undercutting and aren't actually doing the right thing. And oftentimes that's overlooked because it's recycling. So, you know, so if you're gonna have these mandates and you're gonna have these rules, I think putting the same amount of money into enforcement as you put into passing them would be a good step.
Yeah, so that's somewhere where the government can assist and invest in money, getting boots on the ground to go out and do that. Monitoring and enforcement would be really helpful. Oh, great, excellent. Swalia, is that time now?
Yes, Richard.
I've seen you pop back up on the screen.
Yeah,
so
I know there is a lot to talk about. You can continue as well. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, so I'm going to have to ask you all to stop here. But I'd like to really thank all of you for a very, very engaging conversation. As I said, you all could go on, but it's unfortunate that time's up. And thank you, Richard, for moderating this session. This is the last panel on C&D recycling, and I'd like to thank all those who attended various sessions through the day. With this, the International Recycling Week comes to an end, but the networking facility will be available through next week. So we encourage everyone to take advantage of this opportunity to meet and network with industry colleagues and potential clients as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Swalia, and thank you to all the panel as well.
Thanks for having us.
Have a good weekend here in the UAE, at least.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Thank you. The same. Bye-bye.